The night began like hundreds before it. Ethan Cole clocked in at precisely 10:01 p.m., his ID tag scraping against the chipped counter of the security booth. The apartment complex slept beneath a dull drizzle, its courtyard lamps flickering through the rain like dying candles. Inside, the hum of fluorescent lights blended with the low buzz of the CCTV monitors, a white noise he'd long learned to live with. He poured himself a cup of instant coffee, the kind that tasted faintly of metal, and settled into the cracked leather chair. The monitors showed what they always did: empty hallways, a parking lot glistening with water, the slow rotation of the elevator camera. It was monotony, comfortable, predictable, until the screen in the top right corner twitched. At first he thought it was a reflection, but then he noticed the details. The man on screen sat in the same chair, wore the same dark jacket, the same wristwatch ticking toward 10:17. He was Ethan, every movement mirrored, every breath in sync. The air in the room thickened as he leaned closer. The figure on screen blinked a second later than he did, almost like a delay. "Faulty feed," he muttered, forcing a dry laugh. His voice sounded wrong in the empty room. He tapped the console. The screen shivered, and for a brief moment the figure raised its head and looked directly into the camera. Ethan's chest tightened. The image looped, repeating the same second again and again until static filled the display. He yanked the cord from the monitor, heart hammering. The room fell silent except for the buzz of the overhead light. He stared at the unplugged screen, its dark surface reflecting his pale face. Somewhere outside, a door slammed in the corridor, a sound he didn't remember from the usual nightly rhythm. He stood, listening. The echo faded, but his reflection in the dark monitor didn't move. It stayed seated, watching him. Rain hammered against the windows the following night as Ethan Cole stepped back into the security booth. The smell of damp concrete hung in the air. He told himself the glitch had been nothing more than a signal loop, yet his hands trembled slightly as he logged into the system. The monitors blinked alive one by one, filling the room with their cold, humming light. His manager, Mr. Fielding, passed by during rounds, a man with thinning hair and an expression that always seemed to be half asleep. "System playing up again?" Fielding asked when he noticed Ethan staring at the feeds. "Just interference," Ethan replied, forcing composure. "Happened last night. One of the cameras was copying me." Fielding gave a dry chuckle. "You've been watching too many horror films, lad. These monitors go fuzzy all the time." He patted Ethan's shoulder and left with a muttered yawn. The hours crept forward. Midnight passed. The rain eased. The corridors on screen were empty until, in the corner of camera 4, a figure moved. Ethan leaned closer. The CCTV flickered, lines slicing across the screen. The image steadied just long enough for him to see himself walking down the stairwell. He checked the live feed timer. It matched the current second. He froze, staring at the screen. The double reached the basement door and vanished from view. Ethan grabbed his flashlight and stepped into the hallway. It was silent except for the steady hum of the lights. The stairwell stood empty. He returned to the booth, breathing hard. On the monitor, his double appeared again, this time in the parking lot, glancing up toward the security room. Ethan's breath caught as the figure turned and walked inside the main building. Camera 6 switched on by itself, showing the corridor outside apartment 6B. The figure stopped there, hand resting on the doorknob, before the feed dissolved into static. The rain had stopped by the time Ethan left the booth. The air inside the building felt heavier, the kind of stillness that follows a storm. He moved down the hallway, his footsteps dull against the carpet, stopping outside apartment 6B. The door bore a faint mark where police tape had once been ripped away. He hesitated. Entering without clearance could cost him his job, yet the image of his double standing here played in his mind like a command. He slid the master key into the lock. The door opened with a reluctant groan. The apartment was silent. Dust lay thick across the furniture, softening every edge. A wine glass sat on the coffee table beside a wilted flower, as though someone had left midway through a conversation. The faint scent of jasmine perfume clung to the air, unnervingly fresh for a place that had been sealed for months. He turned toward the dresser near the window. A photo frame leaned crookedly against a lamp. In it stood a young woman with chestnut hair and a small, knowing smile. Beside her was him, Ethan, arm around her shoulder, both looking into the camera. His stomach tightened. He had no memory of the picture, No recollection of her. A pulse of heat shot behind his eyes. For an instant he saw her laughing under dim light, wine swirling in her hand, her voice soft and close. He blinked and the image vanished. The room felt colder. His fingers brushed the frame again, tracing her name engraved on the back. Anna Whitcomb. The same name listed in the missing persons report taped to the lobby board. Ethan stumbled into the hallway, his breath unsteady. From the end of the corridor, the CCTV camera turned slightly toward him with a mechanical hum, as if it had been watching all along. The next few nights blurred together. Sleep came in short, fractured bursts, and when Ethan closed his eyes, he could still see the photo of Anna Whitcomb, her hand resting on his shoulder like she had claimed him long before he realized it. By the fourth night, every sound in the building felt amplified. The hum of the vending machine became a growl. The clicking of the lights sounded like whispering. He tried to ignore the cameras, tried to believe he was only tired. But reflections began following him everywhere. When he poured himself a cup of water, the surface shimmered with a face staring up, his own but slower, watching him with heavy stillness. In the window beside the stairwell, his reflection didn't mimic his steps. It stood there, eyes blackened by the poor light, waiting for him to look. Two colleagues on the morning shift whispered as he passed. He heard one mutter, "He looks haunted," before they lowered their voices. Ethan knew he did. His skin had gone pale, eyes hollowed from sleeplessness. At 1:43 a.m., the CCTV flickered again. The same corridor appeared on screen, the one outside apartment 6B. Ethan leaned closer. His double stood there, facing away, body motionless. Then, without warning, the reflection on the monitor turned before Ethan could even breathe. It stared directly into the lens. His pulse thudded in his throat. On the screen, the double opened its mouth. No sound came through, only a faint ripple of static. The figure leaned closer to the camera until its face filled the frame, lips moving with words Ethan couldn't hear. The screen pulsed white, then black. He scrambled to check the hallway in person, but when he arrived, the air was cold and still. Only his distorted reflection stared back from a glass door, mouth frozen mid-whisper. The morning light crawled through the blinds when Ethan's shift finally ended. His eyes burned from another sleepless night. But before he could clock out, a knock echoed through the corridor outside the security office. Standing there was a man in a charcoal overcoat, the kind that carried authority and quiet menace. "Ethan Cole?" the man asked. His tone was low, measured. "Yes," Ethan replied, throat dry. "Detective Inspector Marlowe, Thames Division. We're reviewing a cold case, Anna Whitcomb." "You were listed as an interviewee," Ethan frowned. "Interviewee? I've never spoken to anyone about her." Marlowe's gaze sharpened. "You're certain about that?" Ethan nodded. The detective stepped closer, studying his face with an intensity that felt invasive. Then his expression changed. Something like recognition flickered behind his eyes. "We've met," Marlowe said quietly. 2 months ago, you came to the station yourself." The words sliced through the silence. Ethan's pulse quickened. "No, that's impossible." "I'd remember that." Marlowe's jaw tightened. "Maybe you would. Maybe you wouldn't. Some men bury things deeper than the ground itself." The detective glanced toward the nearby CCTV camera, its red light blinking. "Your name kept showing up in the footage logs. Maintenance, security reports, timestamps that didn't match your shifts. Either someone's impersonating you, or there's more to your story than you're telling." Ethan's hands twitched at his sides. "I've done nothing wrong." Marlowe held his gaze a moment longer, then turned to leave. Before disappearing down the hall, he said, "Sometimes guilt shows up before memory does, Mr. Cole." The door clicked shut. Ethan stood alone in the dim corridor, the red light of the camera flickering against his reflection, recording every tremor of his face. Ethan waited until the building was silent before unlocking the archive terminal. The key trembled slightly in his hand as it slid into the slot. The hum of the server room filled his ears, a mechanical heartbeat that drowned out his own. He scrolled through the digital index until he found the date Anna Whitcomb disappeared. The folder name blinked in dull red, March 17th. Most of the files were corrupted, the thumbnails warped into smears of gray. He played the first that still opened. The feed jumped and hissed, the corridor lights flickering like dying stars. At 12:06 a.m., a figure stepped into view. Ethan leaned closer, the glow from the monitor coloring his skin pale blue. It was him. Same jacket, same posture, same security badge hanging from his chest. The timestamp matched his ID log from that night. He watched the version of himself unlock apartment 6B and disappear inside. Minutes turned to hours as the camera continued its silent watch. At 3:14 a.m., the door opened again. Ethan, or whatever version of him it was, emerged holding something wrapped tightly in a white sheet. The hallway lights dimmed as the figure moved out of frame. Ethan felt his stomach twist. He remembered being at home that night, reading reports, drinking cheap beer. Yet here was proof, burned into video. He paused the footage, his reflection caught in the monitor's surface beside the frozen image of his double. The camera inside the video flickered, glitching for a moment. Then the figure slowly turned its head toward the lens. The corners of its mouth curled upward into a deliberate, knowing smile. Ethan stumbled backward, the chair scraping against the floor. The monitors behind him began turning on one by one, each showing the same looping clip of that smile. The footage refused to leave Ethan's mind. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that smile framed in static. He began checking the monitors obsessively, scanning each corridor as if catching his double would somehow undo what he had seen. Around midnight, the screen on camera 12 flickered to life. The view showed the basement corridor, dark, narrow, and still. Then movement. His double appeared again, walking into frame with the same steady stride Ethan knew as his own. Turned toward the camera, paused, then continued toward the far end of the hallway. The signal stuttered but never lost the feed. For a moment, it almost seemed to be leading him. Ethan grabbed his flashlight and the ring of keys from the desk. The stairwell down to the basement was colder than he remembered, the walls sweating with moisture. Each step groaned beneath his weight. When he reached the bottom, the faint smell of rust filled his lungs. The light from his torch bounced off metal pipes and old boxes stacked against the walls. He followed the same path his double had taken in the footage. Behind a pile of cracked storage crates, something caught the beam of his light. A wooden door, edges warped by damp. Yellow police tape hung loose across it, the words "Do not enter" barely visible. His breath came fast. He peeled the tape away. The door opened with a sigh that echoed through the corridor. Beyond it, the darkness felt alive, almost breathing. He took one cautious step inside. The air was heavy and metallic. Somewhere within that blackness, a voice whispered, "Faint but close. You promised you wouldn't leave me." Ethan froze, the flashlight shaking in his hand as the sound of footsteps began to move toward him from the dark. The door creaked wider as Ethan stepped inside. His flashlight cut through layers of dust, revealing a small room hidden beneath the building, a place no one should have lived in. The walls were lined with peeling wallpaper, the pattern faded to the color of ash. A single lamp stood on a crooked table, its bulb long dead. Yet the space felt arranged, as if someone had stepped out only moments ago. A dress hung neatly from a hook by the bed. A teacup sat beside an old book, half filled with what had once been liquid. On the dresser lay a hairbrush with strands of chestnut hair still caught in its teeth. The scent of jasmine lingered faintly in the air, clinging to the dust. Ethan's torch caught the corner of a notebook on the floor, its pages mottled with age. He picked it up, his hands trembling. The handwriting was elegant, deliberate. Anna Whitcomb. Each entry began with tenderness, describing secret meetings, laughter behind closed doors, whispered plans to leave the city. But the tone shifted. Later pages carried fear. She wrote of his temper, his suspicion, how he followed her when she thought she was alone. Ethan read faster, the words cutting deeper. He says if I ever leave, he'll make sure I stay close forever. The final entry stopped him cold. If he ever sees me again, it means he never left. His knees buckled. Fragments of memory flashed, the smell of perfume, a shout, a fall, silence. He dropped the notebook, gasping for air. From behind, a soft creak echoed through the narrow light. The shape of a man stood at the doorway, still silent, watching. Ethan turned, the beam of his flashlight trembling over the face that looked exactly like his own. The flashlight shook in Ethan's hand as his double stepped closer. The beam split across their faces, one alive, one impossibly still. Dust spiraled between them like ash caught in slow motion. The air pressed against his chest, thick and suffocating. "Who are you?" Ethan's voice cracked under its own weight. The figure tilted its head, expressionless. Then, in the silence, a voice filled the room. Not from the man before him, but from inside his skull. It was his own voice, steady and cruel. "You know who I am. You just wanted to forget." Ethan's breath quickened. "No, I didn't do anything. She left. She left me." The voice sharpened. "She tried to. You wouldn't let her." He staggered back, his heel striking the notebook. The pages flared open beneath the flashlight. His memory bled into the room. Anna's scream, the sound of something striking the floor, his own shaking hands dragging her body toward the basement. He remembered the promise he whispered as he sealed the door. "You'll never be gone. You'll stay with me." The double stepped closer until it stood inches away. In the reflection of a broken mirror on the wall, Ethan saw both of them. His face split in two. One side trembling, the other calm and smiling. The voice in his head softened, almost gentle. "You built your cage, Ethan. I only kept watch." From somewhere above, the wail of sirens pierced the silence. Blue and red lights flashed through the cracks in the boarded window, painting his reflection in shifting colors. The double placed a hand on his shoulder. Ethan's image in the mirror smiled once more before the glass clouded, the figure dissolving into the darkness. Later that night, Detective Marlowe returned to the security office alone. The room smelled faintly of dust and burnt coffee, monitors casting cold blue light across the walls. He sat before the screens, scrolling through the recent footage with careful precision. On camera 7, the basement door appeared. Ethan Cole approached it calmly, flashlight in hand, and locked it with deliberate motions. Then he simply vanished from the frame. No struggle, no sound, no trace beyond the slight hum of the monitors. Marlowe leaned back, jaw tight. He had expected chaos, confrontation, a body, but nothing. Only the lingering presence of someone who should not have disappeared. The building felt alive on screen, shadows stretching unnaturally, corners bending against the light. He advanced the playback. At precisely 2:14 a.m., a figure appeared in the hallways. Alone, carrying a flashlight, moving silently, it hummed, a faint, tuneless melody that filled the empty corridors. The camera followed the figure as it walked past empty apartments, pausing occasionally as if listening to voices that were no longer there. Marlowe's hand hovered over the keyboard. He tried to call the new night guard, but the line went unanswered. The recordings repeated night after night. Every night at 2:14 a.m., the same figure patrolled, always alone, always humming. The new guard refused to stay past midnight, citing unease, whispers, and glimpses of movement that didn't belong to anyone living. Marlowe sat back, staring at the ghostly silhouette. The CCTV continued to hum, indifferent to questions or explanations. Somewhere deep in the building, Ethan Cole was still walking the halls, and no one would ever truly know why. The cameras never stopped watching, and the shift had truly ended.